Okay, so I'm going to talk about what is called universal enveloping algebra and PBW theorem, that is Poincare, Birkhoff and Witt theorem. And so anyway, tensor product is defined, so I just need little bit more, and that is to define symmetric tensors basically. So let me define that and then I will start. So what we saw in the morning is, so let me just revise. So V is a vector space over field F. So as Upendra said in the morning, we'll have always characteristic of F0, F is F bar. You can think of complex numbers. I mean, for some of the things I don't need this assumption, but anyway, this assumption is in Humphreys and we'll continue with that. So first thing, so what was defined in the morning is tensor algebra of V. So I will denote it as a TV, and it is nothing but direct sum of TKV, K is 0 to infinity, where TKV is V tensor V K many times, this is K times. This we saw in the morning. So, and we also saw that this is an algebra. So now we can define multiplication on that. So yeah, one more thing for me, like one of the main theorem itself will say that I will be more interested in basis of such a thing. So let's write down a basis for this. So if I have a basis for vector space, so let E1, E2, En be a basis of V. So I am assuming in particular V is finite dimensional and this is one particular basis. And once I fix a basis for V, I can write down a basis for TKV and in turn TV. Okay. So tell me what is the basis for TKV? So what is, yeah, so it's important how do you write. So say, what should I write? EI1 tensor, EIK, and Ij is between 1 to n. Yeah. So this is basis for TKV. This is basis for TKV. And if I want to write a basis for TV, then I have to take all this for all k. So then I get a basis for TV. So in particular, basis of TV. So first of all, I have to write down the 0, 1. So k equal to 0. T0 is just field, base field F. So the basis, corresponding basis, I will denote it by 1. And T1V is nothing but just V. So I have to take all these basis elements basically. So that will be just E1, E2, En. And what next? That is T2V. And the basis, I have to take all possible combinations, Ei, Ej. Actually Ei tensor Ej. So all possible combinations of I and j, and so on. So you have to collect all of them, and so you can see that it's infinite dimensional, and it's an algebra actually. So one can define a multiplication. So right now it's clear that it's a vector space, but one can define a multiplication on this. So how do you define multiplication? So TV is an algebra over F So how do I define multiplication on that? So it's enough to define multiplication for take an element in some TKV and take another element in some other TLV and then define its product and then just distribute it because you have given direct sum. So rest of will be just like that. So I have to define multiplication from some TKV to TLV and then my multiplication will land in TK plus LV. And how do I define? Take an element here. So in general the elements could be sum, but I am just denoting it by x. So send it to x tensor v, x tensor y. So in general, if you take an element in TV, which will be like coordinates of these kind of elements, x1, x2, x and so on, and then y1, y2, yn, and then you can define multiplication, which will again land in various higher dimensional ones. So this will define a multiplication on TV, and that makes in algebra. So is it an associative algebra? So it's an associative algebra. Why? Why is that so? Tensor product association, that we did in the morning. So it follows from that. Is it commutative? Why? It's not commutative, okay. Because if I take E1 tensor E2, it's not same as E2 tensor E1 when in the basis. So it's not commutative. So in general, I have an algebra which is associative with identity, but need not be commutative. Okay, so here I will, okay, right, okay, I have still defined what is symmetric algebra. So I have this TKV, so these are supposed to be all tensors. So we also wrote down universal property for tensor algebra. So what is the universal property for tensor algebra? Let's just write it here. So if I have a linear map, so first of all, there is an injective map from V to TV. This is an injective map, let's denote it as by I. And the universal property says that if I have a linear map from V to any algebra A is associative algebra, with 1, need not be commutative. And whenever I have a linear map from V to A, say phi, there exists unique map from TV to A, its extension phi tilde. So this defines TV in a universal way. I mean, this can be taken as a definition and you can prove that equivalent to that. Or if you take this as a definition, what we have written down here, you should be able to prove this. So anyway, TV is generated as an algebra by elements of V. So once you have defined phi on V to A, you have no choice but to define in a particular way. I mean, you hardly have any choice. So phi tilde is actually algebra homomorphism. Phi tilde, this is algebra homomorphism, and also it takes 1 to 1. So this is universal property. Okay, so now I want to define symmetric algebra. So what is a symmetric algebra? Symmetric algebra is going to be a quotient of this tensor algebra TV, and I will denote that as SV is nothing but the quotient of TV by an ideal which I denote by I, and the ideal is generated by, so it's going to be a two-sided ideal generated by elements of kind x tensor y minus y tensor x, and for all elements x in V. Is that enough? So this is supposed to be two-sided ideal. So symmetric algebra is going to be tensor algebra modulo certain two-sided ideal, and that ideal is generated by these kind of elements, x tensor y minus y tensor x. And one can do more. Maybe this will be an exercise for us. I think this is the one of the last exercise in the tutorial sheet given. So one can actually do it for each TKV. You can define what is the symmetric elements and go modulo certain ideals there, and not ideals, now it will be just a vector subspace, and then you will get this again as a direct sum of some SKV. Okay, and one can write down universal property for this. So this is again an algebra because the product will be induced from this product. So I can define product on SV, and now it is a commutative algebra. So now it's an associative commutative algebra. So SV is associative commutative with identity. Yeah, SKV, and SKV should be able to obtain as TKV modulo certain subspace. So that's an exercise. This is exercise. And what is k equal to 0 here? K equal to 0 is still the same thing, generated by 1. And if I look at k equal to 1, S1V, it's again V. So V naturally again embeds inside SV. So we still have this. Okay, and yeah, so one can again write down basis here for SV. So again I am fixing a basis for V, which is E1, E2, En. Then given that basis, one should be able to write down a basis for SV. Basis for SV. So 1 is always there, and then you have E1, E2, En. Then what? What? Once again? No, that's not clear. So we have gone modulo x tensor y minus y tensor x. That means like I have to put x tensor y equal to y tensor x. So if I want to take say E1, E2, then I don't need to take E2, E1 because that's supposed to be equal. So that should give you a hint that I have to take only, so let's write down in SKV, I have to take only EI1 tensor EIK, and it's in order to take it in increasing order. Right, so I will take E1 less than equal to I1 less than equal to I2, IK, and take all these kind of elements that forms basis for SV. Yeah. Okay, so that's the thing I need from symmetric algebra, and what we are going to do is that for any Lie algebra L, we are going to associate an algebra of this kind with multiplication and all that. And if I have any algebra, then we have a natural Lie algebra structure on that. If I have an associative algebra, so this is general. Suppose I have A, which is associative algebra over field F, then I can define a Lie algebra multiplication on A. So that I will define x comma y equal to xy minus yx. Just use the multiplication of A. It's not necessarily commutative, need not be commutative as I said earlier. Need not be commutative. So I can define this bracket xy equal to xy minus yx, and you can check that it's a Lie algebra with respect to this. So what I am going to talk now, whenever I have an algebra, associative algebra, I will assume the default Lie algebra structure whenever I say that there is a Lie structure on that. So whenever I say that there is a Lie algebra structure, then I will mean this multiplication, basically, this bracket. Okay. So what we are going to do is that for okay, so again, once again the notation, I will write a script G for Lie algebra over field F. So for any Lie algebra, we will associate an algebra which will be denoted as UG, which will be an associative algebra with identity. Associative algebra with identity, and this will be called universal enveloping algebra. But we don't want any algebra, but this will have a certain property. The property will be that any representation over G I can see as a UG module. So I will write down universal property, and you will see that this is what we get finally. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, so I am going to define, so this is definition. Okay, by the way, so before that, I would just want to write down reference. So reference is, of course, Humphreys Lie algebra. It is, I don't know, chapter number something. It's much later, but you don't need much to prove this theorem. So it's independent of whatever is done before that. So Humphreys. And I am going to follow NAP. It's the same proof basically, but I will tell you why I am following this. Because there are two theorems to be proved, and Humphreys proves in one go. So the proof is a little messy. So one can separate out the proofs, and NAP does that. It's the same proof, nothing, no change. Both are the same basically, same proof and everything same. Even notations are very similar, but he proves in one go two theorems, so it's complicated. So I am following proof from here, which is much more clear, written in more pages than what Humphreys writes. To be precise, Humphreys writes in like 2 pages, but Knapp writes in 5 pages, so it's better. So definition. So definition of, yeah, Knapp, Lie groups. Beyond an introduction. Universal enveloping algebra. So I am going to define what is universal enveloping algebra for a Lie algebra G. So we start with a Lie algebra G over field F, and universal enveloping algebra UG. This is going to be quotient of tensor algebra. Okay, so this is defined to be quotient of tensor algebra. So G is in particular vector space obviously. So I can make sense of tensor algebra, and then it's supposed to be quotient of Tg by certain ideal J, and I will tell you what J is. So J is supposed to be two-sided ideal generated by this kind of elements, x tensor y minus y tensor x minus bracket xy. Such that, so elements you take xy from the G, which is G is I am identifying with T1G. So take two-sided ideal generated by these kind of elements. Yeah. So I am going to write down again as we wrote down in the case of tensor algebra or symmetric algebra. Did we write in the case of symmetric algebra what is universal property? Let's write it down here. So then we are going to write down universal property definition for this universal enveloping algebra, and then it will be clear why I want to do that. I mean, why I have defined it that way. So here I can write down universal property for symmetric algebra SV. So again I am given with I already have this inclusion map from V to SV. We said that S1V is nothing but V. So I have this inclusion map from V to SV, and the universal property is that if I take any linear map from V to commutative algebra now, not just associative, now I go only to commutative algebras. So it is an associative, commutative. So whenever I have a linear map from V to commutative associative algebra, I can always lift that map to symmetric algebra in an algebra homomorphism now. So this will be obviously algebra homomorphism taking identity to identity. Okay. So I want to write down universal property for this universal enveloping algebra. Yeah, so several questions, so we'll solve it one by one. So question number 1, do I have inclusion of G in UG? That's question number 1. It's not clear. Earlier it was very clear in the case of tensor algebra and symmetric algebra, but right now it's not clear. And why is that so? Because you see that there is a relation between degree 2 elements and degree 1 element. Earlier there was no such thing, because the modulo whatever we were going, that was in same degree basically. So whatever you go modulo, that was not creating any problem. So now we don't know. And so that's question number 1. And then question number 2 is obviously writing down universal property definition. So write down universal property for this. So let's write down universal property first. So answer to this question, question number 1, answer is yes, and that's the main theorem which we will be proving. That is PBW theorem. And we are going to write down 2 first. So this is proposition. So with the notation as above, so I have Lie algebra G over field F, and UG defined as there, TG mod J, and I have a map from G to, so you see that UG is supposed to be quotient of this tensor algebra. So I have actually surjective map from TG to UG, the natural quotient map, because it's nothing but TG mod J, and there is injective map from G to TG. So I have a map, this map is injective here. I have a map from G to UG, but we don't know whether it's injective. So I have a map here, and the aim will be to prove that this map is actually injective. So we'll denote this map as I. So I have this map I here from G to UG, and and the proposition says that this pair UG and I satisfy following universal property. Which is, so let's write down here. Yeah, so let's write down here. So I have this map already from G to UG, which is I, and whenever I have a map from G to any algebra A, where A is yet again associative algebra. So I want this map, any map phi from G to A, Lie algebra homomorphism. Now here it's not Lie algebra, but I am putting the obvious Lie algebra structure, xy minus yx. So whenever I have Lie algebra homomorphism phi, I should be able to extend this to a algebra homomorphism. Now these two are just algebra, so I should be able to extend this to an algebra homomorphism. So phi I want this to be Lie algebra homomorphism. So once again, for any associative algebra with identity, a Lie algebra homomorphism from G to A, we can extend it uniquely to algebra homomorphism from UG to A. Yeah. So let me write down in words. So it satisfies following universal property given a Lie algebra homomorphism phi from G to A, there exists unique algebra homomorphism phi tilde from UG to A, such that the diagram is commutative. Starting from I, if I apply phi tilde, I get phi. So actually this is equivalent to definition. So one should be able to, so right now in fact we are proving one way, because I have now defined that UG as TG mod that two-sided ideal J. So I should be able to prove this. One should be actually able to prove the way around also. Like one can make this as a definition and prove that there exists such an algebra with this property. And existence means exactly you have to put UG as that. Yeah. Okay, so let's give proof to this. So how do we prove this? We are given phi, we have to define phi tilde. So what do we do? So UG is defined as a quotient of TG. So first we have to see that whether we can lift this map to TG, and then see whether we can kill that ideal J. So I have a Lie algebra homomorphism. Definitely it's a linear map. So I should be able to lift this map to TG. So this is proof. So I have map from G to A, this map phi, and this is definitely linear map. So by the universal property definition of tensor algebra, I should be able to lift this map to TG. So there exists unique phi tilde, which is algebra homomorphism. This we can do. Now question is that I have to find whether phi tilde of J is 0. If I can do that, then I am done. Right? One can again say why it's unique actually. So right now I will be just saying that there exists this map phi tilde. So maybe let's give it some other name phi1, because this is not exactly phi tilde. So let's call it phi1. So we have to prove that phi1 kills J. So let's check if we can do that. So I have to take some element in J. So let's take the generating elements, which is x tensor y minus y tensor x minus xy. So what is this element? So now you have to follow this map. So where x and y are elements of G only, x, y belongs to G. So phi1 is an algebra homomorphism, so I can take phi1 inside here. It will become phi1 of x tensor phi1 of y minus phi1 of y tensor phi1 of x. Oh, now we are in A. Okay, so I don't need to write tensor. So it's just the usual multiplication of A. So phi1x, phi1y, and then phi1y, phi1x, and minus phi1 of bracket xy. So can I again take phi1 inside? So question is that, so right now I am writing phi1 of x comma y, but my question is that, can I write this as equal to phi1x, phi1y? So this is question. I have elements x, y from G. So phi1 restricted to G is just phi. So everywhere I can write first of all phi x, phi y minus phi y, phi x, and bracket xy is again an element of G only. So I can write it as again phi of bracket xy. But now this is exactly saying phi is a Lie algebra homomorphism. So this is equal to 0. And this is equal to this because phi1 restricted to xy is just phi. So we see that it actually kills all the generating elements of the ideal J. So it kills ideal J. So I can pass to the quotient here. Then it will give me a map from UG to A. And it's unique. Why it's unique? Can you say quickly? But yeah, phi1 is unique. So now I am going to quotient. So up to here it's unique. Phi1 is unique. No, if I have another map here, so this will be lifting. This is quotient now. There could be many liftings. Yeah. No, this is just quotient map. This is quotient map. So this is smaller. So if I have,
you could compose the quotient map.
No, now I have suppose two maps here.
Yeah. So then you
two different maps.
from TG to A.
Okay. Okay.
But then that contradicts uniqueness of.
Yeah, but then how does that imply that this is? It can happen, right?
I'm saying if there are two maps from UG to A, there will be two maps from TG to A. But that's a contradiction.
No, they are equal. Then what? Why does it imply that this map, two maps here, they are same? They could be equal here, composing after composing.
Then the maps from TG to A will also be different.
Because that's a projection.
I mean, it could be that TG to A maps are different.
It's a quotient map. You are going modulo something. So it can happen that.
I mean, if TG said you have two maps, they could reduce to the same map from UG because UG is a quotient. But
Not right.
not also. Yeah.
Because it's a projection.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's.
Okay. So basically to say that the image of G still generates the whole algebra. It generates TG and it generates UG. So the as is generating set is the same G. Okay. yeah, so now the main question now is to find a generator for a basis for UG. If I am given a basis for G, find a basis for UG. As we wrote down for tensor algebra and symmetric algebra, so we'll be able to write down a basis for UG. Is it commutative? Why? Is UG always commutative? So questions to think about. Is UG always commutative? And one of the tutorial exercise which you will get soon, what if G is commutative, what can you say about UG? So that I am not writing, it will be there in the exercise set anyway. So let's go back to tensor algebra for a while before I write the main theorem. So in tensor algebra we have more than what we said so far. So Tg is supposed to be direct sum of k equal to 0 to infinity Tkg. So saying this meaning we have actually a grading, it's a graded algebra. So it's not just we said that it's an algebra, it has more structure to it, and it's a graded algebra in the sense that if you multiply the elements from k and s, it goes to k plus s. So it's actually graded by z, not z, positive integers. So k and s, if you multiply, it goes to k plus s. So that is extra thing we have here, which exactly means that it's a graded algebra. And we can also define a filtration here. So the filtration is, I'll denote it as a Tng is nothing but k equal to 0 to n Tkg. Yeah, so then I have T0 of G contained in T1G so I am writing lower now. This is supposed to be sum of first n Tks. So now you will get a increasing sequence here, and this is what is called a filtration. And union of this whole thing is Tg. So it's a filtration. People who have studied commutative algebra a little bit, they will know that whenever you have filtration, you can define some kind of topology on that. So it's used in that sense. So when we are going to prove things about UG, we will also say that we'll not just find a basis for UG, we'll actually make it a graded algebra, and grading will be induced from, in some sense, from the tensor algebra. So let's define right now. So we anyway had map from Tg to Ug, which is Tg mod this ideal J. So we'll send this Tig under this map wherever it goes. So let's call this map pi. So did we call it I? Yeah, we called it I. No, that I was a map from G to here. Let's not give it any name. So Tig to, so its image under this map will denote it as Uig. And by definition of filtration, this will be again a filtration here because it's just a quotient. Union of this will be again whole Ug, and they will be containing each other like this. So this will be again a filtration of Ug. Again I have U0 and this is a filtration. So let me write down what is Poincare-Berkhausen theorem. We'll also call in short PBW theorem. So the theorem is about, if I have a basis for Lie algebra G, we'll actually write down universal enveloping algebra. So let me say what it is. So suppose I have G, Lie algebra over field F, and this theorem and proof works for not necessarily finite dimensional, even in infinite dimensional for certain situations. So we don't need the full general version, but let me write it what I can. So suppose let me follow my notation. This xi, I in some indexing set I is a basis of G, where I, this indexing set I is simply ordered. Yeah, so for example, if I take finite dimensional Lie algebra or countable dimension with certain ordering, say ordering of Z or something like that, so this everything will work. Okay, so I should have simple order on this indexing set I. Then I can write down. Then I have to write down the basis of UG.
Simply ordered means any two elements are related.
Yeah, any two elements are related. There is an order and any two elements are comparable. So then the following set is a basis. And so let me put it like this, such that I1 is less than I2 IR, and summation over, anyway GIs are integers, so I don't need to say that. Yeah, then the following set is a basis of UG. Maybe I should put one separately, 1 comma these elements. And where this I is the map from G to UG, which, to recall the notation, this is map from G to UG. So G naturally includes inside tensor algebra, and then UG is quotient of tensor algebra. So the composition map I had denoted by this I. So this is the theorem, and we want to prove this theorem. So one of the corollary of this theorem, right away you can see that if I look at the elements where I have only one factors here, then that's nothing but the basis of G. So that will say that G to UG, this map is inclusion map. Yeah, because I have explicitly written down basis for you. These JIs are of course greater than equal to 0. JL. So let's try to prove this. Okay, so here is a point I should make a comment. One can also, so I said that we are going to talk about this grading also. So right now I have a filtration for UG, but TG has also grading. So can I get a grading on UG also? So that there is a natural way of defining grading from a filtration, but one has to identify what the grading is. So we'll say that the grading is very similar to symmetric algebra. It will be actually as a vector space So it will be like symmetric algebra, grading here on UG. So that will be the next theorem, and the proof of Humphreys, he proves this theorem and grading in one go. So the two things get mixed up. So I'll write down that theorem separately after this, and we'll see the proof of that will follow from this. Okay, so let's prove this. So let's write down a couple of lemmas before starting the proof. So lemma A. So lemma A, let me write it down. So suppose I have this element. So let Z1, Zp are elements in G, and sigma is a permutation of these P letters. So sigma is in symmetric group Sp. Then these elements I Z1 to I Zp. So this is I actually minus. Now I apply permutations to this 1 to P. So I will write down that element Z sigma 1 up to I Z sigma P. This element belongs to U P minus 1 of G, and this UP is here, the image of TIG inside UG. It's a filtration here. So I'll make use of that filtration several times in the proof. So this product actually, these are product of P elements, right? So that should be naturally in P. So these two elements individually they are in P. But I am saying that if you subtract, you get in P minus 1, whereas subtraction is done according to this by taking a permutation and permute them according to that, then you get in P minus 1. So let's write down proof. So it's enough to prove for a 2 cycle. Is that clear? Because any sigma is product of 2 cycles, so it's enough to prove for 2 cycle. So I can fix, and not just that, it's enough to prove for j plus 1 only. To prove for sigma equal to j comma j plus 1, because this kind of elements will generate whole symmetric group. So it's enough to prove for that. Then let's write down first the identity where I involve only 2 letters. So if I have j and I of j plus 1 minus, then switching this, so what is this equal to? I is this map from G to UG. UJ is modulo something, right? So you make use of that. What is the ideal J? It's x tensor y minus y tensor x equal to bracket xy, right? So this will be I bracket of these 2 elements. So this will be I bracket of these 2 elements. Yeah. And now pre-multiply and post-multiply by these remaining elements, and then you will get this. Because now this has gone to one lower, right? This is a product of 2 elements in the, think of in the tensor algebra. So there were degree 2 elements kind of, and this is degree 1 element. So if I now multiply by the remaining things here, then I will get 1 less. So that's why I have UP minus 1. So this statement is nothing but saying that I am making use of the bracket. Is this clear? Okay, so we are writing this map I several times, so let's drop this I. So let me put some notations, which I will use only for this proof, otherwise we'll keep writing this. So notation. So I have this map I from G to UG. So I'm going to follow this notation. I have this element xi, of which image I keep writing I xi, right? So instead of that I will write yi. So just to make the expressions look neater. And whenever I have an indexing set I1, IP like this, we'll call it increasing if this is in increasing sequence. Instead of I, let me call it whatever. Okay. IP and then for this capital I, if I write yi, then yi I mean that I take yi1, yi1, yip. So for this element, what I have fixed? Oh, so capital I, not that I. This is just notation. So let's call it L. So if I have a tuple integers I1, I2, IP, so I will call a tuple increasing if I1 is less than equal to I2 is less than equal to IP. And for any tuple, I'm not fixing here this increasing. For any such tuple, I will, whenever I write YL, it means I am taking this element yi1, yi2 and yip. This makes sense in UG because UG is just an algebra, so I can multiply these elements. And yeah, one more notation. Since I have put only simple order, so I need to make this I is less than equal to L, where L is such a tuple, means I is less than equal to each one of, less than equal to minimum of that. So this is means I is less than equal to minimum of all these. IP. Okay, so these are the notations I will follow for this proof. So let's write down one more lemma. So lemma B, if I take all this set YL such that L is increasing tuple from that indexing set I of length say P less than equal to P, then this YL, this generates UPG. Yeah, this is first lemma, in fact, in the direction of proof. So this lemma will say that whatever the set I have written down, which I am claiming that this is a basis, this spans UG. It says at least that. And why is this? So let's look at the inverse image of these elements. What is the inverse image of YL? So okay, let's go back. It's a lot of notations actually, right? So I have this map from TG to UG. Actually I had G here, from where I have taken this map. And this Xi is the basis here. I have sent that here to Yi's. And then this YL is nothing but product of Yi's, and I am taking in increasing order. So if I take such elements, if I take such elements, then what happens? Look at this pre-image in TG. Any idea? Yeah. My question is that if you take only increasing tuples and look at its pre-image and add it to the ideal J, because I am going to modulo that definitely spans TG. That's my claim. That is follows from lemma A. So if you apply lemma A, then you get that this spans. So now we will be only proving that it's a linearly independent set. Okay. Okay. So the proof that it's linearly independent is little involved, as I said earlier, for the reason because the ideal which we are going modulo is not generated by one kind of 1 degree elements. There are 2 different degree elements involved. So, okay. Yeah. So let's write down the proof of PVW theorem. So yet again, I will fix some notations. P is polynomial algebra over F in the variables Zi, and I is from that indexing set I, and Pp is again polynomial in Zi of degree less than equal to P. So just notation. So in other words, you can think of this as a symmetric algebra over that basis, right? If I have this vector space here G with this basis I am given, what will be symmetric algebra of G? It will be a basis given by product of these elements, right? And where like switching is allowed in some sense, multiplication is commutative. That's exactly the polynomial algebra in that those many variables. So that's what I have put as a notation. And if I have indexing set I1, IP, then like earlier I said, I will write for basis element, I will here also write down as Zi1, Zip. And so there are 2 statements which I am going to prove. So statement A, we want a representation pi from this Lie algebra to this polynomials. Okay, so we want to make this polynomial algebra in a G module. That's the first thing. And in such a way such that if I multiply Pxi to the element Zl, I get Zi Zl. Okay, for I less than equal to L. And second statement is that the proof follows from this A. So first we will prove that. Proof of the theorem follows from A. So let's prove B first, then we construct that representation. Let's keep this theorem. So let's prove this claim. So suppose now I have constructed this representation pi from like G to polynomial algebras. So P is going to be now G module, right? So but the polynomial algebra is, in some sense I have symmetric algebra. So actually instead of writing P, I could have also written as just S of G. So but S of G, we know it has a nice basis. All the elements 1. So these kind of elements where I don't have I here, instead of this I have Zi. I have chosen Zi as a basis. That's a basis. That was very clear. We wrote it down in very beginning. Yeah. And if these elements are acting like this, make it act on the element 1. You get exactly this set, and that will say that it's linearly independent because they go now inside this polynomial algebra. Let's write down the proof for this. So suppose.
For I less than or equal to L, right?
Sorry.
Only for I less than or equal to L.
Yeah, I need this in certain way. So because for algebra, I can take bases in increasing order. I can take bases in only like this kind of elements only I need, right? I need only symmetric elements in success. Yeah. So the point is that, okay, let's do this calculation. So first, suppose I have this element yi1, some yi p, this element acting on 1. So suppose I know A. So right now we'll prove A later. So first I assume A. So I take this element and make it act on 1. So act on 1 meaning like I'm thinking of P as G module. Yeah. It's a representation. I said it's a representation. Yeah, it will give map from UG to P. So right now we are not making use of that. First I want to prove the theorem using that. So take this element. This element is make it act on 1. So I can make it act on 1 by 1, right? So this is same as I can take yi1. Oh, I wrote down yi element of in UG. Yeah, so think of that lifted to G to UG. So as soon as I have this, then I have map from UG to this. So P is a UG module. So that's why yi is the element of UG. So A implies P is an UG module. Yeah. So now these elements yi's are in UG. So I'm making act on P. So this yip acting on 1, because of that property, it has to be zip. But now this is lower than this, so I can make again this act on that because the way I get that. So finally, in several steps, the element zi1 up to zip. So this is for increasing I. So I1 is less than IP. And for less than equal to will work, right? Yeah. So what I do for the proof now, I take these elements, make it act on 1. I will get all the polynomial basis elements. and they are linearly independent. So that means this set has to be linearly independent, because if there was some relation here, then it would give relation there. So that proves that it's linearly independent. So we only need to construct that representation. Okay, so okay. That's the way we construct the representation here. So that's this condition translated to that. Okay, so let's prove A. So proof of A. So we need to construct this representation from, so we want a map pi from G to endomorphism of P. So to construct this map, I have to define the action of G on P, right? So what I am going to write down, I will construct map pi xi's from PP to PP plus 1 with certain properties, which will be equivalent to constructing this representation. So for in fact for all x actually I can write down, then we can, it's just for basis, just so claim so we can construct this map satisfying A. So I will write it as property AP such that pi xi acting on ZL is Zi ZL for I less than equal to L, and ZL in BP is that if I take this element in general without this condition, then it should still belong to Zi ZL mod PP. And this is set again for all L with ZL in PP. And then there is one more CP, is that acting on ZJ, then I can commute this and with the bracket. So So how do I construct this representation is that I will make each element of G give a map from P to P. To get a map from P to P, I can define that map for each degree. So I am defining that map for P at degree, and the map I will construct in such a way that it takes P at degree to P plus 1 at degree, and I will do it for each x in G. Instead of doing for each x in G, anyway I want linear maps, it's enough to do it for basis elements, xi's. So that's why I have written down this property is only for xi's. Okay, and constructing this map, I also want to make sure that ultimately when I get this map, this is a linear map. This is a Lie algebra homomorphism. The action is Lie algebra. This property will make sure that this action is a Lie map basically. That's what I have done here. You can see that this 2, if I take this side, then xi minus xj has to be bracket of xi xj. So this third property will make sure that finally this map pi to p will be Lie map, and these two are, this one is the required property because I want to construct it that way, and this property just makes sure that it's an honest action in some sense, because at least it goes to that degree modulo pp minus 1, but there could be more element. So because the filtration which I get at UPGs, those filtration are not like preserving the degree exactly, they can go to lower degree element also. So that's what is happening here.
Sorry, so I mean, it's not necessarily that A1 is equal to AP, is it?
Yeah, because for pth one I am writing.
I know.
Huh.
So for I is strictly bigger than L,
Yeah,
would it be ZL goes to ZI ZL minus bracket ZI ZL?
so that case is taken care here.
I know, but is that a specific formula? I mean, does it have to be minus bracket ZI ZL?
No, it can involve many more lower order term. It can involve many more lower order terms, so it's not clear. Yeah. So the proof of that is by induction. We'll prove it by induction.
So therefore, I'm sorry, in UG,
Yeah.
you have written out this basis.
Mhm.
Rather, this one IX, I1 and so on. So the product, I mean, if I wanted to multiply, suppose it was just one term, say x1 and x2,
Mhm.
how would I multiply x2 with x1 in that order? It would be x2, x1 minus bracket x1, x2.
Yeah, so if for lower order it is fine, but suppose I want to multiply some x1, x2, x3, xn, then there will be several brackets involved.
Each time you'll have to
Yeah,
put the
so there will be
bracket.
several brackets involved.
I know, that's why I
So-
thought that your AP for I strictly bigger than L would have to be ZI ZL minus bracket ZI. Sorry,
No, ZL is, oh, that's,
It should be capital L.
yeah, so this L is not just one element L actually. I wanted to put it as an index capital L. So let's write it L, capital L. So it's a tuple.
now I. But is that L for just one element in it?
Yeah, then this is just only degree 2, so then there will be only one bracket involved. It will just go to the lower one. Yeah. In PP, the P0 is, the polynomial is just generated by 1, this set, and then I have to define that, and the map I have to define, so that is forced by the property A, because then I have to define it just on 1, what it does to 1, and then I will just take it to the Zi of that. So then pi xi, I will define it to be Zi, because I have to satisfy A anyway, so I have no choice but to define this. And then you can see that the B and C is automatically satisfied because there is nothing much to do. You have to take the lower element, it will be automatically satisfied. So the for P equal to 0 it's true. So now I will assume that it's true up to P and then try to prove it for P plus 1. So let me put, okay, induction hypothesis. So let us assume we have defined pi x for all in G satisfying Okay, for all g on x on p, say p minus 1, and we'll prove for p and satisfying ap minus 1, bp minus 1 and cp minus 1. So up to p minus 1, say I have defined, I have to define it for p. So we need to define pi xi times zl for L of length p and increasing p tuple, right? So I want to define for p product now what I can do. And further I have to make sure that these three conditions are satisfied. So case 1, so first I have to define it, right, and then check that whether the properties are satisfied. So case 1, if I was less than equal to this L, which by notation means that less than equal to every element in L, then I have no choice but to satisfy A, P. So then I will define this to be pi xi on zl to be zi zl. And then case 2, I is not less than equal. So at least there is one element in L which is lower than I. So let's assume that L looks like, I'll follow my notation, some j, capital J, and j is less than I, and j is of course less than equal to every element in capital J, and j is of less length p minus 1. Yeah, this is case 2. So here I need to define. So again, we can define whatever, but that will to satisfy something, so I will be forced to do something. So let's check what we need to, what am I forced to do. Let it be there for a while. So let's see. Define pi of xi on z capital L, which is pi xi. Z capital L is j comma this capital J I written. So I can write it as zi, no, not I, that is j and capital J, because j is less than equal to j. So that I am allowed to do it, and anyway it involves the lower order, so it's fine, that we already know. But this is again the lower order, so I can again write it as a pi of something. So this is pi xi, pi xj of zj. But suppose I wanted to switch this, but then I cannot switch because j is less than I, not the other way around. So I have to use the property B, not A. I am not in that situation. So, but instead, what I can do, I can use the CP, C condition. So I can write it as a pi xj, pi xi on zj minus pi of xi xj on zj. Okay, then further, now further I can use on this I, now I is less than equal to capital J situation. No, it's not that, so I can apply BP. So I will write it as pi xj of zi zj plus some element w, and w is in lower order p minus 1 plus pi of this. Now I have written everything which I can use the previous thing to apply. Yeah. So I will define, I will use this to define, which will force me some of these properties. Write down here. So now I am going to write down what I defined. So pi xi on zj, not zj, zl. I define it to be zi zl if I less than equal to l, or I will define it to be this way. This is otherwise. Yeah, so I showed why one is to do that. And in doing that, I have already made use of this BP. AP is forced anyway. So once I define it like this, AP is already taken care of. I have defined it that way. BP automatically comes because these two are in PP. I mean one lower. So these two automatically go there. So BP is automatically satisfied. Only I have to show that CP is satisfied in general. CP will be satisfied in some cases. For example, when or something, the way we have defined. But I have to prove in general. So my claim is that if I define like this, I am done. So only thing I need to prove CP, the property CP. This condition CP. It's commutator of xi and xj and then zj. This element zj.
That is not x capital J, no? Then it should be x small.
This term. Wait a minute. Xj.
Then how do you take bracket of something with x capital?
Okay. Right. Yeah. So I think here these are small j. This is small j. Yeah, I don't need to do it for product. Product is anyway not defined. That's defined only in UG. So if it was yi, then I could do that, but not for this. So yeah, so that is small j. This one is capital J. This is fine because this zj is in symmetrical algebra or in UG. Yeah, so I just need to take xi and xj and then I have to prove this. So this automatically A and B are satisfied, only I need to check C. So let's do that. So how much time I have? 2:15.
How much do you think?
I mean I will need 5 minutes to prove this and then I have to.
I think maybe we should solve the logical point. Perhaps
So
this and then say.
yeah. Then after that I need to just define grading and then define free Lie algebra. So maybe 15-20 minutes more, maybe tomorrow. So this is just computation. It follows just from certain computations. So first of all, you observe that it's clear that if I have j is, so we have defined it for j is less than equal to I basically, because if I equal to j, then the condition is automatic anyway CP. So I can safely assume that I have already done it for I is less than equal to j. Yeah. And then if I have xi xj, then by putting minus xj xi because of the Lie algebra property, for I is less than equal to j. These two kind of things. So in general, what I need to prove that I have some index, say my index is capital L, is j comma j, and further I will write j as k comma k, with k is less than equal to k, and here also j is less than equal to j, and k is less than I and k is less than j. But I and j I am not saying anything, so I will just conclude everything from there. And of course, mod k is p minus 2. Yeah. So let's write down what we have got. So we have this pi xj on zj. So now I have to follow this notation, so better I write here. So let's rewrite. So pi xj, zj is going to be z small k, z capital K, because still k is less than capital K, so it's fine. So I can write pi xj and zk as pi xk zk. This I can do again because I have this. J is less than, yeah, so that I can do that. But now I can, so now I am in lower situation, right? Mod k is p minus 2, so I am in p minus 1 situation. So I can assume Cp minus 1 and apply that here. So I can assume Cp minus 1, so I get pi xk here and pi xj here, zk plus pi of bracket of xj with xk and zk. That is fine. So this is the expression I have. But I am supposed to calculate pi xi of this. So I apply pi xi again on this, and then again take the switching of j and I, and then basically subtract to get this. So it's just writing down it basically clearly. Okay, so let's apply pi xi to that expression. So apply pi xi. So I get pi xi applied to pi xj zj, and then I get pi xi, and pi xj zj is equal to whatever you can see from there. So I get pi xk pi xi applied on so I have just applied on that expression. You can check whether I am writing correctly. So first what I am going to do, I will just switch this to here, xk and xi. So use Cp minus 1 because I have length less. So I can apply that. So I have pi xk, pi xi on pi xj zk. Then I have to write the bracket of that. So pi of xi xk, then pi of xj zk. So this I have written for the first term, and then second term also I am going to switch I and j. So again there will be two expressions like this. The second term is here, so I am going to switch them. So you can see that it will be a little complicated. Xj xk pi xi zk plus xi xj xk zk. Now at this point I write the same expression with I and j interchange and then subtract, and then finally my claim is that we will get what we want. So interchange I and j and subtract. So many of these things will get cancelled, because if you change I and j, you will see that you get, for example, here you change I and j, then you get this expression. So these two things will get cancelled. So you see that we'll get roughly what we want. So let me write it down finally. So pi of xi, pi xj, zj minus on zj, this is equal to, so this term will get cancelled. So we'll see only we are left with zk and minus zk minus pi of xk psi on zk on zk. Now you can combine these two terms, where you can take pi xk common and you will get bracket of xi and xj. Yeah. So you will get pi of xk. I take common, then you get bracket of I and j, xi xj with zk plus pi of xi xj xk on zk and zk, and again use this p minus 1 term to rewrite this, and then you will finally get that you have pi of xi xj on pi of xk zk, which is I write now write as z small k, this xj z small k with capital K, and so this is what I want. This was zj. So this is Cp. Yeah.
Properties A, P, B, P and C, P.
Right.
Do they determine the representation completely, right?
Yeah.
But even A, P and B, P themselves determine it completely, or?
No, Cp you need to make it Lie multiplication.
No, that is true. That is
Just as a vector
required.
space, they
But-
will do
No,
probably.
but I mean, if I want an action, a Lie algebra of representation with properties A, P and B, P,
Mm-hmm.
then that is uniquely determined.
Yeah, Cp is nothing but saying that the multiplication is it preserves the bracket.
But
Taking,
in order
nothing
to do
else.
what we wanted, we needed only the A. But that doesn't determine the action completely.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. So Cp is just Lie algebra, and Bp is making sure that things don't go above. So it preserves the grading. So AP is because we wanted that condition. BP is that it preserves the grading. So meaning like not grading, it preserves the filtration actually, to be precise. So filtration is at, say, if you look at pth term, things should not go above p plus 1. They can go p plus 1 and whatever it is below p plus 1. So that is the BP. So it says that filtration is preserved, and CP is just to make it the Lie multiplication. It's the Lie homomorphism. So the point now is that one can use this to give a grading to this UG. So that I will do tomorrow. So let me just say what I want. So now on UG, you have this filtration, U0 and then for, if I look at UKG, mod UK minus 1. So from this, we'll see that it has a basis, which the basis is very similar to the basis what I have for SK, symmetric algebra, symmetric tensor of K elements. It has very similar basis for this, but it's only I mean, one can prove that they are linear isomorphism, vector space isomorphism. It's not quite symmetric algebra, but only grading is in some sense very similar to symmetric algebra. So we'll do that tomorrow. And then we have to define what is called free Lie algebra. Where? Which one? Here? Here. No, what I is saying that I have written this expression here for pi xi, pi xj. Now interchange in this I and j, write down once more, then subtract this and the new one. So that's what I have written down. So first I have pi xi, pi xj, then I have subtracted j and I. Now I switch j and I, right? Here I have written j first and then I. So the same expression you write for j and I switched and then subtract. Then you will get this. There will be this term which will get cancelled actually. So you will be left only with this. So there will be some cancellation here. That clear or? Okay.
So Anupam, just to make sure you understand. So the key thing in the making the definition was you had those two cases, right? Case 1 and case 2.
Right.
Case 1 was where the I was less than the first one. In
Right.
which case it was simple.
Yeah, that's
And
forced
when it
because
was
of.
the other,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
had to push it to the other side.
Yes.
That was the key calculation, right? Once you do those right, then everything else follows
Yeah,
just based
yeah.
on that. Is that right?
Yeah. So when you don't have that condition, then that's where you use the grading is preserved.
Okay.
So then you will be again forced to define in some way, certain way, and then finally you have to check that it
It's
does.
actually an
It's actually done. Yeah. It's actually an action, Lie algebra action. So A and B basically force us to define that way. So as a vector space action, just A and B does basically.
So we'll meet at 4:50.